following subject matter is real and only intended for mature audiences. Discretion is advised.
People are dead after deputies say a man went on a shooting rampage.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her.
I can tell you the scene out there is absolutely horrific.
Nobody knows where this individual may strike next.
This is 10 Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10 Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host. Hi, thank you for joining today and taking the time to listen to my little podcast. The episode today, I've probably done it in my head like 3 times. While I'm working out how to say things before I even turn the microphone on to talk to you, my inner monologue is in overdrive. I'll be washing the dishes or doing any other mundane chore, cleaning out the microwave. That's one that needs to be done. If I have any volunteers, you let me know. But while I'm doing all that stuff, I'm talking about this episode in my head, kind of how I'm going to say things. And literally this week, I discovered something that I didn't believe at first, and it absolutely shocked me. There are some people in this world that don't have that inner voice. I'm nearly constantly talking to myself about anything and everything verbally in my head, though. Like, it doesn't come out with mouth words. It's all in my head. And mostly I'm just roasting myself. I might trip over something and I'm saying something to myself, just roasting myself daily. This happens every single day and at all times. But there are people in this world that don't do that. It's just silence in there. Like, how do you do math? That's how I do math. I talk to myself in my head to try to figure things out. And how do you remember a grocery list? I'm so confused. If you're one of those people without an inner voice, talk to me. Let me know how you deal with day-to-day life, because I'm pretty interested. So let's get to the story today that we've already established. I've gone over multiple times with myself in my head. In 2005, the disappearance of 18-year-old Natalee Holloway shocked the nation and the world. She seemingly vanished without a trace during a school trip to Aruba. During the years, several suspects have been named and even arrested. Yet nobody has been convicted of killing Natalee, nor has her body ever been found. Natalee was born on October 21st, 1986, the first of 2 children of Dave and Beth Holloway in Memphis, Tennessee. As her parents divorced in 1993, Natalee and her brother Matthew were raised by their mother and stepfather George in an upscale area of Alabama, Mountain Brook, a suburb of Birmingham. According to her mother, Natalee was a strong-willed, hard-working, and very independent person from a young age. She was basically an all-around success story. Natalee made friends easily. She made straight A's and was part of the National Honor Society. In addition to studying, Natalee also found time to volunteer at Habitat for Humanity, the Humane Society, and Hope Lodge. If Beth had to come up with one bad quality in her daughter, she would say that Natalee had a habit of always leaving her room like a tornado had just passed through it. Clothes and books scattered everywhere. But then again, I have a teenager, and that's how his room looks most of the time. In May of 2005, Natalee graduated with honors from Mountain Brook High School and already had a full scholarship to the University of Alabama. Roll Tide. After all the hard work, the 18-year-old was excited for the traditional senior class trip to the Caribbean island of Aruba. Natalee had been getting ready for it since the new year, picking up outfits and swimsuits to take with her. She couldn't wait for the big exotic adventure with all of her friends. But while Beth was happy seeing her daughter's excitement, she was also extremely worried. Beth trusted her daughter and her friends, but she definitely didn't trust other people on the island. And when Beth heard a story from a former Mountain Brook student who had returned home from his senior trip to Aruba 2 years prior, her apprehension reached peak level. According to him, some locals had been trying to tempt 2 of his female classmates to leave at some point from a popular night spot. He stepped in and got them out of that potentially risky situation. Beth gave her daughter the typical parent-to-child talk about the possible dangers she could face during the trip. At the same time, Beth reminded Natalee how she had not been anything other than responsible all her life, and that she trusted her to be able to take care of herself. However, when Beth then left Natalee at her friend's house before their departure, she drove away, not knowing that that was the last time she would ever see her daughter. On May 26, 2005, Natalee and 124 other Mountain Brook graduates arrived in Aruba for their unofficial celebration trip. With them were 7 teachers as chaperones, but they weren't supposed to follow the students' every move. What they did do was meet every morning for check-in and help the teenagers if they needed it. The group settled in at Holiday Inn Resort near the northern end of the island. According to Natalee's friends, they then began spending days on the beach, dressing up for dinner and exploring the clubs and nightlife. Pretty standard stuff. However, it was reported that Natalee's drinking was excessive from the very beginning. She would start her day with a cocktail and end it having many others in between. Apparently, Natalee didn't show up for breakfast on at least 2 occasions, which many presumed was due to her being hungover. Then, on May 29th, Natalee met a man named Joran Vandersloot at the hotel casino, where he introduced himself as a 19-year-old tourist from Holland. Natalee agreed to meet him at the Carlos and Charlie's nightclub later that evening. The exact location had been mentioned in the story of the former student back in Alabama, the one who had seen men trying to lure girls to leave with them. But it was the last evening of the vacation, and Natalee and her friends wanted to have as much fun as possible, so they partied with a large group of classmates at the nightclub until it closed at 1 a.m. At this point, many of the teenagers returned back to the hotel. After all, they had a flight to catch the following day. But not Natalee. Around 1:30 a.m., she was seen leaving the area in a silver car with 3 men, who were later identified as Joran Vandersloot and his 2 friends, Deepak and Satish Kalpi. The next morning, Natalee didn't show up for the scheduled meeting in the hotel lobby before their departure. After her friends were then unable to locate Natalee anywhere in their hotel and her passport and bags remained untouched in her room, her parents were informed about the situation. Beth needed a moment to digest the message that she had just received. Her daughter had not shown up for the flight back, and in fact, no one had seen her since the night before. Beth knew something was very, very wrong, and she later said, quote, "I immediately knew that my daughter had been kidnapped in Aruba. Natalee has never been late in her life." Most parents would go into panic mode, but Beth didn't. She kept her cool and became extremely focused. She had a mission to accomplish. First, she called 911, reporting her daughter had been kidnapped, and she was currently driving 110 miles an hour straight through Mississippi. Nobody should try to stop her. Afterward, Beth called her husband and the FBI. By the time she'd reached Birmingham, a family friend had already arranged for a private jet. Around 10 p.m., Beth, her husband, and his 2 longtime friends landed at Aruba's Queen Beatrix International Airport and began their search for Natalee. She found out about Joran Vandersloot real quick, and he admitted to leaving Carlos and Charlie's nightclub with Natalee and the Kalpi brothers, driving to a lighthouse before dropping her off at the Holiday Inn around 2 a.m. However, the story was not confirmed as they were unable to locate the night guard, who Joran claimed had helped him take Natalee back to her room that night. On June 1st, Natalee Holloway was not even yet an official missing person, but a group of approximately 100 tourists and various locals joined her parents in search efforts. Following weeks, both FBI and members of the Netherlands Marine Corps, as Aruba is part of the Dutch kingdom, were looking for Natalee, but none located any sign of her. The first arrests in the case were made on June 5th, but for some reason, the police did not apprehend the men that Natalee was last seen with. Instead, former security guards of a temporarily closed hotel were arrested and then released 8 days later. Soon after, Joran's father and a party boat DJ were taken in and released almost as quickly. Finally, on June 9, 2005, after enough pressure from Natalee's mother and stepfather and government officials, Joran Vandersloot and the Kalpi brothers were taken into custody. At this point, their story had already changed. Now the 2 brothers claimed they had dropped Joran and Natalee off at a beach near the Holiday Inn. Afterward, Joran insisted he left her there and walked back home. However, after a month without any progress on the case, the Kalpi brothers were released. Joran remained in prison until September 3rd, when he was also let go due to lack of evidence. At this point, the Holloway family offered $200,000 for information leading to the location of Natalee's remains, as many people believed her to be dead. Still, nothing seemed to help them get answers for what had happened. Months passed, years passed, without any new leads. Then, on November 21st, 2007, Joran Vandersloot and the Kalpi brothers were arrested again. But as the pattern in the case predicted, the 3 men were again released a little over a week later. The police claimed to have new incriminating evidence, but they still weren't able to move the case forward. On December 18, 2007, an Aruban prosecutor declared the case closed, even though Natalee's remains had never been found. And usually a case closed means the case is closed, right? Well, less than a month later, in January of the next year, a Dutch journalist released a supposed confession tape from Joran, who of course insisted he was lying at the time, and nothing really ever came of it. even though on the tape he said he had dumped Natalee in the ocean. Last pieces of what kind of man Joran van der Sloot is were put together in 2010 when he offered to reveal the details of Natalee's death and the location of her body, but only if her family paid him $25,000 advance of a $250,000 reward. However, the FBI soon discovered that the information Joran had revealed was false. The house where he claimed Natalee's body was hidden had not even existed at the time of her disappearance. Joran later commented on the attempted extortion, saying, quote, "I wanted to get back at Natalee's family. Her parents have been making my life tough for 5 years." Still, while his involvement in Natalee's disappearance has never been fully proven, Joran did end up behind bars for a long time. On May 30th, 2010, exactly 5 years after Natalee was last seen, Joran van der Sloot killed 21-year-old Stephanie Flores inside a hotel room in Lima, Peru. During his trial, Joran had the audacity to blame his actions on, quote, "extreme psychological trauma," suffered from allegations of killing Natalee Holloway. Needless to say, the defense didn't work, and Joran was eventually sentenced to 28 years in prison on January 13th, 2012. Just the day before Natalee Holloway was formally declared dead by an Alabama judge at the behest of her father, Beth, however, would still have wanted to keep her daughter legally alive. As her lawyer said, quote, "Beth's position is that she has no proof or indication that Natalee is still alive, but absent any proof or indication that she is dead, she always wants to hang on to that slight glimmer of hope." Of course, it's very unlikely that more than 15 years later, Natalee would return home. But as long as Joran van der Sloot does not open his mouth or tell the truth for once in his life, we probably will never know for sure what happened to her. One of the main theories is that Joran and his friends took Natalee to a boat that night, where perhaps she turned down his advances. In a fit of rage, Joran then strangled or drowned Natalee before dumping her body in the ocean. If they were far enough offshore where the currents shift running west, it could explain why her body never ended up back on the beach and would never be found. Whatever the actual details are, Natalee's disappearance seems to be one of those cases where the culprit is right in front of everyone's nose, yet they can't be charged due to lack of evidence and incompetent police work. However, in this case, Natalee's family might get some comfort from the fact that the last person to see their daughter was eventually put behind bars. Just not for Natalee's murder. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for listening, and if you are new to this podcast, I appreciate you checking it out today, and I hope you become a subscriber. And when you become a subscriber, you get all the episodes as soon as they come out. You don't have to go searching for 10-Minute Murder every single time that you want to listen to it. It's always right there. Also, connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media. Links are in the show notes of this episode. And if you've got friends that are into brief true crime, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Be safe and have a good night.